Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and thank you again for your patience, as always. It's very nice to see you on this lovely Sunday. Just to kick off, welcome, Jim, to being a member. I don't know if you were a member, if you joined just before I biffed it with the opening, or if it was just after. But if you did do it beforehand, I apologise. But we don't do refunds or anything. But thank you very much for joining. Welcome, welcome. We have a lot going on with the chat today. We have a few stories that we're going to go through. We are going to be joined in a little bit by the wonderful Brandon Clark, who is a social society over on YouTube. And I think he's on Instagram as like right-handed leftist, all different names that he's under. But he'll be joining. We'll be checking in with him for all of the kind of US election fallout. To kick us off, though, it mainly feels like this week we're just going to be covering some of the most dog shit takes we've seen on mainstream media.
Yeah, that is the feel, having like been through what we're going to be going through. Yeah, I think that's probably where we're going to go at.
There's a fair amount. It's normally bad. It feels worse this week. I think like the Trump fallout has just led to everybody going into a variety of different meltdowns. And then we've also got we're going to go through the Sky News coverage of the Israeli footballers / anti-Semitic attacks, depending on which hour you saw the video. So we'll be going through that. I know we've got dog shit takes in the mainstream media. Never. Just before we do start, notice this in the chat. Where's Sneaker's accent from West Yorkshire? I am not from West Yorkshire. I'm from the Midlands, but I spent a lot of time in London and got like a posh London voice, and then now I'm in Manchester. So there is a weird thing going on, but I don't even know what a West Yorkshire accent is.
Kind of Dave. No, Davey's not West
Davey's
Yorkshire, but
Leeds.
it's that area.
No, is it
find,
that?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Right. Well,
yeah, that's the one.
There you go. Asked and answered. We've started right in here with the most important stuff. I mean, just as some examples of what we're looking at this week, even when it's not to do with Trump, it's been dog shit. We've had all kinds of kind of thought pieces coming out from the likes of The Independent, talking about how obviously now that Trump's here, we all have to be like Trump. And that's the only way we're going to get things done. The return of the Blairites, why Keir Starmer should tap into Labour's past. I've always thought that Keir Starmer could do with being more like Tony Blair.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, like Tony Blair, probably more left-wing than Keir Starmer in a lot of areas. So, but I don't think that's what they mean when they say that, you know? Like, if they meant that, go for it. But I don't think that's what they meant.
I don't think that's what they're saying at all. No. I don't feel like that's what they're saying at all. And especially when we compare it with one from our man Quentin this week, Quentin Letts, dickhead, has said, why I believe doommonger Keir Starmer must be to blame for the damn dreary weather that's draining the life out of Britain. Now, don't worry, people. I didn't actually become a member of Mail Plus in order to be able to see this. You can use a website called paywallreader.com if you need it at any point. That will cover this without. Is it? How long before we do the debrief am I allowed to talk about piracy? Like recommend piracy on stream?
I don't know. We might get Curtis in trouble here.
Don't do what I've just said. I was only joking.
Yes,
that was
definitely don't.
Actually, in that article, he talks about how Keir Starmer has become like this. He said it's like the socialism of the 70s now with Keir Starmer taxing the rich.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where he's coming from. I mean, yeah. Just the other day, I was walking past the Red Army, dragging somebody out to be taken to the gulag. It was just like the 70s, or the 70s if you listen to like an older person talk about the 70s and the bin strikes.
Yeah, I think Stalin-esque is how I'd describe Starmer.
Oh yeah,
in many ways.
Yes,
just won't let businesses thrive. He used an awful example of talked about how there was one day in the last month, where we only had 3.6% of our energy coming from wind power, which is a sign that wind power is doomed to fail. That's the only day in that month that's happened. But Quentin, we do also have just a feature from Quentin playing into the continuation of our fantastic production value for today, because I'm in charge of it. And a little quote from our founder, Curtis Daly, if anybody knows him. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to read it out loud.
Excellent.
But that's some of the analysis. There's more of this analysis to come, if you guys are excited. We have, I mean, there's a whole load of bad takes. I couldn't actually go through all of them, but the Trump takes have been absolutely egregious. The Observer, obviously, the ones where we had the journalist accusing people of blood libel the other week, they're now talking about there's lessons for the left to be learning. Again, to be clear, the Democrats are not the left. I don't know who they're specifically talking about in this article, but the left obviously being Kamala Harris in the wake of their defeat. We also have some incredible investigative journalism from a guy called Will Potter in the Daily Mail, who wore a MAGA hat to America's most liberal park, and the results were surprising. And then the Financial Times have just come straight in and said it with Trump's New World Order, which is... Can you imagine if they'd said that about, like, if Bernie Sanders had won?
Yeah.
The New World Order?
Yeah, not a great look. But also, I don't know if New World, more of a New World disorder. Like, I think that's probably probably where it's headed. I'm not gonna lie. Because of course last time he didn't have control of the Supreme Court and the House. Now he's got both of them and the Senate and the presidency. It's like there's not a lot of restrictions on what he can do with regards to international politics now. It's not great.
It isn't great, Cog.
Yes. I'm kind of understating the case a bit there, aren't I?
You're right. It's absolutely not great. We are going to go through a couple of the takes from that side as well. But I think it was covered by Curtis and Kevin on Friday, where they were talking about what we saw from the coverage of the Amsterdam football match debacle, clash, attack, unsure, where Sky News in particular really showed their asses on this one. So they originally put out a tweet and then they reposted. Get out of here. 1 minute. There we go. So they did originally... they put out a different tweet to this, and I think this was one that people picked up on really quickly. It's why the whole media literacy use of things like the Wayback Machine is so important, because seeing it change in real time makes it a lot easier to spot. And I know that nobody in here is going to be surprised that like Sky News is biased, but I think it's super, super stark. It was actually the Gaza notifications account which put this out, which said... This is the original first version of Sky News' new video, which does not meet its standards of balance and impartiality. In the newly released video by Sky News, the opening sentence from the original version has been altered, and the narrative within has been restructured to include terms like anti-Semitic and pogrom, ending with a witness saying, "What happened reminded me of October 7th. When the first video was removed, it was anticipated that it was because a statement from a police spokesperson would be added. However, the new video has instead been restructured to align with a Zionist narrative. Traditional media is rapidly losing credibility." Now, I thought, Cog, what we can do is we can watch both of the videos side by side, not simultaneously, hopefully.
Yeah.
But for everyone in the chat, you'll also be able to potentially hear us whilst this is on. So, Cog, don't say anything crazy about piracy or anything.
Oh, okay. Just so I know.
Cool.
I'm glad.
Just to clarify. Okay, we'll go. So this is the first video. This is the original video that Sky News shared.
Violence in Amsterdam left at least 5 people injured and dozens have been arrested. But what happened? Supporters of Israeli football club Maccabi Tel Aviv arrived in Amsterdam ahead of their UEFA Europa League match against Amsterdam club Ajax. On Wednesday, social media videos verified by Sky News show Maccabi Tel Aviv fans tearing down Palestinian flags from outside of homes. Other social media videos appeared to show residents chasing Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. On Thursday, just before the game, crowds of Maccabi fans were filmed singing racist and anti-Arab songs. While a pro-Palestinian demonstration had been banned by the mayor over fears there would be clashes. Later that evening during the match, Israeli supporters appeared to disrupt the minute silence for Valencia flood victims with chants, whistles and fireworks. Maccabi fans were seen attacking locals as a police car can be seen driving by. People with Palestinian flags were seen marching on the streets. Maccabi supporters say they were beaten and attacked on the streets of the Dutch capital, with videos showing some of the violence.
Say free Palestine and we go. Good.
Sky News could not independently verify all of the footage shown. Police arrested 62 people. 5 were taken to hospital, but have since been discharged. Israeli far-right ultras are notorious for their racism and physical violence. Dutch, Israeli and British leaders denounced the attacks as anti-Semitic and even referred to it as a pogrom. But their statements failed to mention the assaults by the Israeli hooligans against Dutch citizens. Violence in Amsterdam.
So that was the first video. Obviously calling out the things that they failed to mention in coverage, and the fact that Israeli football hooligans are often quite aggressive, quite violent. Let's go over to video 2.
Violence in Amsterdam left at least 5 people injured and dozens have been arrested. But what happened?
Everything should be done to track down and prosecute the perpetrators. This is simply anti-Semitic violence against Israelis that actually defies description.
Supporters of Israeli football club Maccabi Tel Aviv arrived in Amsterdam ahead of their UEFA Europa League match against Amsterdam club Ajax. On Wednesday, social media videos verified by Sky News show 3 men tearing down Palestinian flags from outside of homes. A second Palestinian flag was pulled down from a building in a clip verified by Sky News. Another video uploaded to social media shows a man being chased through the street with a caption that reads, "Watch and enjoy 6 Zionists chased away, free Palestine." On Thursday, just before the game, crowds of Maccabi fans were filmed singing racist and anti-Arab songs. On that same evening, a pro-Palestine demonstration took place at the Anton de Compline Square after authorities banned organisers from holding it outside the arena. Later that evening during the match, Israeli supporters appeared to disrupt the minute silence for Valencia flood victims with chants, whistles and fireworks. A video posted on social media shows a large group of hooded men dressed in black running down the street and striking people at random.
But I want to make clear, we are used in Amsterdam that there can be tensions. There are many demonstrations and protests, and we are always prepared for them. And of course, they are related to the situation in the Middle East and the ongoing war in Israel and Palestine. But what happened last night is not a protest. It has nothing to do with protest or demonstration. It was crime.
People with Palestinian flags were seen marching on the streets. Maccabi supporters say they were beaten and attacked on the streets of the Dutch capital.
It's the same feeling that I felt in the morning of the 7th of October.
Sky News could not independently verify all of the footage shown. 62 people have been arrested and prosecutors are considering anti-Semitic motives. 5 people were also taken to hospital but have since been discharged. Dutch and Israeli leaders denounced the attacks as anti-Semitic and even referred to it as a pogrom.
I mean, the first one was pretty biased. The second one they've just added more and more in there. I think, yeah, they were saying that the original reasoning for that being taken down was that there was going to be some sort of input from a police spokeswoman, and instead they've just grabbed, I guess, people on the street, eyewitnesses, to talk about the link to anti-Semitism. I think the most obvious part was this piece here, like literally the front section, and also bearing in mind that most people don't read or watch a whole video. Everybody who stayed in the chat here has done very well by watching the whole video twice. But the immediate change to that, I mean, we've seen like a lot of people sort of talking about this on the internet, but not very much coverage on mainstream media.
Yeah, I've watched somebody who does a series about media literacy on TikTok, which is really quite good. And she was saying that like active and passive voice are really important, but also narratives being framed in definite terms or merely reported terms is really important to media literacy. But I feel like you should probably be the one to lead on media literacy, given that I was referring to you.
You talking about me?
I was talking about
you.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking, like, who is this bitch?
Yes. Who's been stealing
Who the hell?
my wheelhouse?
I mean, I could talk, since you've asked, I could talk about it from the perspective, what we've seen a lot of in coverage of Palestine. Like, you see it everywhere, but a lot of it's like the scare quotes of like, it's reported as being this thing, as in someone thinks it's this thing, as opposed to something that's actually factually happened. It can get weaponized in different ways. Like the BBC will often put things in air quotes when they're talking about Palestine that are actually things that have happened, but they'll weaponize it the other way, as like if someone, like there was something like a nurse's family being killed in a strike, they'll put that in quotes and go killed in strike because someone's said that the nurse's family were killed in a strike, even though that information has been verified. The other way around, you have things like the Daily Mail saying that people have been barricaded in a room by Palestine protesters, when actually that's just what someone said. It feels like that was what happened, and it hasn't. What you've then got with the passive and active voice is the passive voice is when someone says something happened and we don't really know how, like a house was broken into. But when you know that someone's broken into that house, you would say this person has broken into that house, and that's when it becomes the active voice. But yeah, there was like levels on levels of different like forms of, like there were already a lot of forms of spin in that original video. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think Sky have addressed it. I don't think they've come back and like they've not responded to anything around it. Maybe we should ask them for comment. Do you think they'll reply to us?
I doubt that Sky News would reply to us. For one thing, I think they want to like keep this down because it's. I feel like they've. It's that thing with Sky News that we were actually discussing during the election, where they. I think it's that they want to get content out fast with Sky News. More than anything else, Sky News particularly wants to be the first on the scene and the first to do the report. So they often put things out and then have to retract them. But in this case, it was like they put stuff out. It turned out it was actually accurate, but it wasn't in line with what the rest of the mainstream media were running with in terms of the narrative. And with the sort of like social conformity of like, oh, we can't be caught. And it's not. It's to put it through the lens of the manufacturing consent lens. It's not that people at Sky News were like, oh, we've just been told off by our overlords who say that we have to, print everything in favor of Israel, right? That's not it. What it is that they looked at the scene around them and they were like, oh, we're out of step with what everyone else is thinking. We better withdraw this because otherwise we're going to see ourselves shut out of conversations and losing access to potentially journalists, but also like mainstream politicians who are big supporters of Israel and Zionism.
Yeah, it's like if they've self-censored. That's a really big thing. Like, especially like I can sometimes go down the route of being like, everybody's doing this on purpose and everyone's having like a meeting once a year to talk about how to talk about these things, and then that it's getting filtered down from the top. But it is really important from a commercial perspective as well, like wanting to put out content that like generates the most outrage or that's most clickable. People will put more and more of these kind of loaded terms, and they might not even they literally don't care about the consequences of how that content like appears or the impact that it has. Flow Snakes actually said in the chat that they've seen like straightforward footy channels calling out the mainstream media on this, like not political channels, but just like
was that Gary Lineker, perchance, that you're referring to there, Snowflake? Because Snowflake, Flow Snake, because I know, that could have been Gary Lineker, who actually has been quite outspoken on this. Once again, putting himself in the in the firing line, in order to sort of stand up for something right.
He's always getting told off about that. Yeah, and then we've got Django Fett, the real Django Fett, has said it was already heavily biased to begin with. They were pressured into making it extremely biased, which I guess fits into what you're saying then. There's a very high chance that they've self-filtered there. Actually, this also ties in from Edward Sexby. You can use this Sky portrayal and behavior as an object example of Chomsky and Herman's propaganda model.
Yeah. It does sort of fit, yeah. It does very much fit into that model.
So I'm just going to check through here. I want to. Can I just use this period of time just pull up compliments about myself from the chat? Is that centering myself?
I feel like no one's going to stop you.
Nobody can.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I appreciate that. I will not do this anymore. Why ask Sky? At least they got close to an accurate version once. The BBC ran footage of McCaffrey beat a man in the street and narrated the opposite. New York Times, yeah, some outrageous distortion. That's the thing, is like that first video was like at least slightly close. It was still, but the thing is, I think you get so used to the most extreme forms of bias that we see in our media that things that are just less insanely extreme, you start to think, oh, well, they're pretty balanced actually. And I feel like that's where we have issues where people will say like, oh, like the Daily Mail, obviously they're really biased, but the level of extreme that they speak on makes people more trusting of things like the BBC or more trusting of things like the Guardian, because at least it's not as bad.
Yes, yeah, they will play a role in creating the sort of media atmosphere that allows people to feel like you're by choosing the less bad options that you're being media literate, and in reality you are just choosing options which will lie to you less often, but will still take advantage of situations like this.
Yeah, or like I mean, I get it a lot where people will be like, oh well, I just use like loads of different sources, and it's like just using like any source, becoming like trusting of any media source and seeing it as like I can just like let my guard down and not be critical. I think people are a lot better at spotting media bias with sources that they already think of as biased. So as soon as you go, oh, they're not that bad, you let your guard down, and then immediately that like the BBC's sort of respectability, like overall kind of presentation as being neutral, gets them a long way just because they use neutral language, but they're still putting out some kind of absolutely outrageous stuff. Shall we? Yeah, a body's just said on here that like BBC version is arguably worse because it's more believable, which kind of leads into liberals.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that a segue?
Yeah. I mean, if we're going that way, that's absolutely fine. I was going to talk about the comparison between this and Kristallnacht.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Because I think it's worth sort of like bearing in mind what Kristallnacht actually was. So the reason that people are bringing this up in relation to Kristallnacht is that Kristallnacht, or the Night of the Broken Glass, took place before it was the day before the anniversary of Kristallnacht, because Kristallnacht took place on the 9th of November, 1938. And this was, but for those who don't know, was an event which was obviously triggered by years and years of propaganda, but from the Third Reich's perspective, the way that they were looking at it, it was to do with a diplomatic incident that happened in France, and they blamed the Jewish people for it. The Jews obviously had nothing to do with it, but they blamed Jewish people for it. And then I was reading through my old notes to try and find out, because I couldn't remember where it was. At the beginning of the night of Kristallnacht, Goebbels prompted a test by instigating a riot in a town called Hesse in Germany. And the Supreme Courts of Germany's record stated that the leader had decided, upon hearing his report, Goebbels' report on Hesse, that such demonstrations should neither be prepared nor organised by the party, but that no obstacles should be placed in the way if they took place spontaneously. So the policy that the regime adopted was one of withdrawal, right? It was one of, like, we're going to hold back the military and let any violence that happens to happen, whether our people are involved or not, just happen after that. There was a report that was drawn up shortly afterwards by the Nazi Supreme Court. It was a secret report that was only released in the 60s when the Soviet archives were opened up. But they commissioned a secret report after the events of Kristallnacht and concluded that the killing of Jews could have been prevented by a direct order from Nazi high command. But since this didn't happen, it has to be assumed that it was neither an intended or desirable result in the mind of the Führer or his inner circle. And the report openly states it was carried out, that the Kristallnacht rioters carried out not simply the assumed, but the correctly understood wishes of the leaders, however vaguely expressed. It's this idea that we get into of stochastic terrorism, cumulative radicalization. The reason I bring this up is it's exactly how so much Israeli violence has been happening, right? It's very rarely the expressed wishes of those from the top. So the comparison with Kristallnacht, instead of comparison with literally all of the football hooliganism and violence, like Ajax versus Maccabi, they're not known. Neither team is known for being like particularly not that they're not known for being violent, but their competition isn't known for being that fierce. It leaves out a whole narrative, but it introduces a whole new one, which it flips everything on its head in the most kind of gross way, because it completely it completely removes the violence that's like the structural violence that we see that's so comparable with Kristallnacht that was coming, but that wasn't coming from the from Ajax side, that was coming from the Maccabi side more than anything. But to be honest, I do think it was football hooliganism, football violence, but I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, no, you're completely right. I think it's like in the West Bank, with people being given guns, like settlers being given guns, and then the army just not getting involved in any way. There is a comment in the chat around kicking Israel out of international events, like we had to ban South Africa. If I try and upload an image now to share with people, will it? Do you think I'll ruin everything?
I don't know. Maybe you could attempt it.
Do you think I have that ability?
You could attempt it.
I just wanted to bring up, because if we're talking about kicking Israel out of FIFA, we will have one ally in that could be quite powerful in Keir Starmer.
Oh yes, the dear leader.
This would be the perfect time for Keir to return to his roots of wanting to kick Israeli racism out of FIFA. Yeah. I do think it'll be really interesting to see if he makes any. I don't know if he made a statement on it. I don't think he's made any kind of statement on it yet. I would really love if we could all just remember that this is always available online if you search for it. And it can be shared with him at any given time. Yes. The weasel.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, send it to him. God, yeah. I was going to say that there's another framework. I mean, there's several other frameworks of analysis that you could use for this, other than like it's anti-Semitism. I don't think there's a good argument for it being anti-Semitism. It's like all football hooliganism, it's like wrong and awful, and tends to like destroy town centres.
Yeah.
But I think the argument for it being like anti-Semitism from either side, just that doesn't work for me. I think it's more interesting to talk about it in terms of like male violence and the male violence surrounding sporting events, because I mean we know that male violence and sport is like there's a heavy link there, and we know that there's like 37% spike in domestic violence when the England national team loses, right? Women and like innocent people basically end up on the receiving end of male violence, and let's not forget that Maccabi lost, right? So it fits into this pattern of violence like being dished out to whoever it happens to be around. But also the reference which the Israelis made, because one of the chants they were using was "Let the IDF win and fuck the Arabs." Right? That's specifically a link to and specifically a reference to, as some Israeli leftists have pointed out, is a specific reference to the rape of Palestinian prisoners. Right? It's specifically a type of violence which is it's very. I mean, all types of violence are male, to be honest, but it is very.
It's very specific,
patriarchal,
and targeted. Yeah, I mean, football hooliganism stuff, like fights, like the domestic violence thing, is absolutely crazy. Every time I think about it, it seems like in sports in general, there's like a very specific, like. I remember seeing ages ago there was like a pro-choice march, and there was this guy trying to have like conversations with pro-choice women at the protest, and like some of them shouted at him, and his whole thing was like, you just can't have a conversation with people, like you just can't have a civil conversation because everyone's just really angry. And that was like women protesting about like the rollback of Roe v. Wade. And then like a football match happens and it's like, oh, guess we'll all just punch each other and we'll all be like, well, the football team did lose. Like, it's very, very strange. But I mean, like people have said in the chat, there's a lot of kind of unusual things around this. But I think the immediate positioning of it as this anti-Semitic attack is just, it's just bizarre, especially when actually in the footage they're showing this would be the time to refer to it as a clash, which is what they love referring to things as.
Yeah.
So it seems bizarre that they'll say like, yeah, it was started by the Israeli football fans doing all of these terrible things, but we think it was anti-Semitism. Like, I just feel, I mean, even it's just bad editing alongside it. But yeah, it's very, very, very strange.
When people complain about like they say, "Oh, women are getting like so emotional over the overturning of Roe v. Wade," I like to remind people that Andrea Dworkin said that PIV sex, penis and vagina sex, straight sex, should be considered rape every single time, right?
Yeah.
And then I like to say, okay, so would you like to have a calm, rational conversation about whether or not every single time you've had sex in your life you've been raping a woman? And funnily enough, men don't want to have that conversation. It's almost like their rights, you know.
It's a weird one.
Yeah, it's strange. Why won't they have this like calm, rational debate about it? Why do they have to get so emotional about it? Do you know
I've never ever heard the acronym PIV.
Yeah, yes.
Before now.
Yes.
Also.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. But you're right, and it always reminds me of that guy. What was his? We've gone on to a tangent here, but like what was his name? Brett, Supreme Court guy. Was his name Brett? I can't even remember if his name was Brett. He just looked like a Brett.
Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah.
Brett Kavanaugh, crying whilst doing his interview about whether or not you would actually be good as a Supreme Court justice, because he job interview situation, weeping because he was like, "Is it so wrong to have a beer?" Like, it's just absolutely, the double standard is crazy, but
yes,
that is not, obviously, in this situation. We've got a whole different load of pieces that fall into it as well. society evolved and sport like law became less violent. We've got some interesting questions in the chat here. I think, do you want to go through a little bit of the Trump fallout that we've seen?
Yeah, honestly, if people are talking about this in the chat, though, we could have a look at people's comments.
People's comments? We can have a look. I mean...
yes, yeah, I'm not so much a fan myself. I think women drink better than men do. Like, so women will drink, like, something that is, like, this big, right? But it'll floor you. Men drink stuff that's, like, this much, like, liquid you've got to get through. And it will take, like, half the night. And what was that? 2%. Rubbish. Okay?
This is... I used to think... well, I was going to say that I used to be able to drink loads. But I also had to stop drinking because of how much I was drinking. So
right.
it probably, if anything, it proves your theory.
Yes.
There's a reason I'm now not drinking ever. Because women can't handle our drink. But actually, the UK, I mean, looking at this, like, talk about being banned from European competitions due to hooligans. English drinking is considered to be like a really, like, my husband's Romanian, and he was telling a taxi driver a while back about the fact he had an English girlfriend before we got married, and the taxi driver was like, "Oh, English, they drink a lot, right?" Like Romania. In Romania, they're like, "Oh, they're a bit heavy on that." Brett liked beer, a succulent beer. Still likes beer. I mean, this is where we're at with the chat at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. No, that does make sense.
Just going through.
Brilliant political Cal. Just seeing Cal's comment. God.
Political commentary going on here. Cal. Absolute menace. Considering last time me and Cal did one of these, it was basically like Cal's video was just a photo because he wouldn't unblock. Like, he kept like lagging so that he was just an image on a screen, looking like a Renaissance painting as well, because his lighting was all lovely and he had a candle in the background. And then my camera just turned into like an 8-bit Minecraft situation. I don't think you're in a place to talk to us on this. We'll talk about all of this. Actually, there is an interesting point here from Anton, who has said, bringing us back to what we're actually just trying to talk about, is football hooliganism. I guess the idea is, from what Anton said, like, it's almost like reductive to refer to it as like just hooliganism, because it would be whitewashing the sort of specific targets of the violence in that sense.
Yeah, I think because of the international context, I can see the argument for that. However, a lot of football hooliganism is extremely racist. Like, it just wherever it is, wherever it goes. Like the French football teams will like throw bananas at their fans of French football teams will throw bananas at the black players on their team. Like the level of racism in football is outrageous. Like, that's part of why the whole like taking the knee thing was such a big thing when the England team were doing it, right? And it's one of the few times that I was actually like genuinely proud of the England football team, was when they were like, no, fuck this. We are going to take a stand against racism in football, because some of our like front men, I'm thinking particularly of Saka, were like at the time some of like the best people we had. Harry Kane is not one of the best people we had. Okay, just saying. So, like some of the front men that we had, including Saka, he stands out to me, were black people who were getting constant racial abuse. Racism in football, massive thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a good thing to. I guess it's where it intersects, right, between the, obviously in this instance with the Israeli fans. I'm thinking as well about things like that match a while back where like the Israeli fan like interrupted an interview and was like, "Hey, no politics here. Don't talk about politics here." And the football ended up being like Free Palestine. I think, given like what they were chanting, obviously is absolutely outrageous. To me it did feel provocative in the sense, but I mean, also, if you create an environment in which people are not able to have Palestinian flags up because it's considered to be an attack, then those Israeli football fans are going to try and tear down flags and chant horrendous things, because you've given them a situation where there is literally no limit to what they can count as defending themselves. And if Palestinian flags are considered to be hateful, like Suella tried to make them in the UK, like them, and when you've got things like Germany changing the laws in the way that they have, and also in Amsterdam they've now banned protests for 3 days, I think, as a result of this. You're basically engendering, it's like having a spoiled kid. Like you're teaching them again and again that anything that is a disagreement with them is worthy of being attacked or taken away. And yeah, I mean, it is absolutely horrendous. Just from Turn Left here, this is now a men-hating channel.
Yeah, I feel like I've been going off on men a little bit. Sorry.
If you'd like to support Turn Left as a men-hating channel, you can support us over at turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. You can become a member, you can become a Patreon, or you can make a one-off donation. Anything that you can do to support is appreciated. Do be aware there are some men on this channel. Almost all.
Where are those?
There are caveat of men hate. There are men. We're not. I don't hate men. I've got loads of male friends on this channel. I know loads of guys.
Yeah.
I think you're all good for you. You're all doing well. Let's see. So let's go.
I'm not sexist. My wife's a woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
We could go through into I'm a self-hating man. Runs really fast. The support link. God love you all. We appreciate you. You're the good ones. We're going to jump into I have a male fiance. There are good ones. They're just very quiet. All right. Listen, let's go over to the video that we had from... Do you want to lay the groundwork a little bit?
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys have heard. It's been kept on the down low. But Donald Trump won the US election, and the fallout's not been great. And it didn't take long before liberal media decided that Kamala's campaign, in which she had, for example, sent Bill Clinton to tell a state which was heavily populated with Muslims, relatively. That they should just forget the whole Palestine issue, and actually they just didn't get it that Israel was really great. And then Kamala obviously has been campaigning alongside Liz Cheney, and showing how much she could get along with the Republicans, saying she wanted Republicans to be in her close in her administration. And some liberals looked at this and decided that the real problem was that they hadn't been open enough to right-wing perspectives. The real problem is that we just need to keep moving rightwards in order to keep people on side. And so this is a clip from was it MSNBC or CNN? I can't remember. I think it was CNN.
We will learn shortly.
It will be on the screen, but it stood out to me, so I was like, I'm stealing that and putting it up.
Let's just double check where it is from me to make sure that I've actually got it on here. Yes, I've got one moment. Let's see if it was here. It's uploaded. Okay, great. Here we go. This is going to look terrible. Just 1 second.
Friends in the Democratic Party, this is not Joe Biden's fault. It's not Kamala Harris's fault. It's not Barack Obama's fault. It is the fault of the Democratic Party in not knowing how to communicate effectively to voters. We are not the party of common sense, which is what the message that voters sent to us. For a number of reasons. We don't know how to speak to voters. When we address Latino, and language has meaning. When we address Latino voters as Latinx, for instance, because that's the politically correct thing to do. It makes them think that we don't even live on the same planet as they do. When we are too afraid to say that, hey, college kids, if you're trashing a campus at Columbia University because you're unhappy about some sort of policy and you're taking over a university, and you're trashing it and preventing other students from learning, that is unacceptable. But we're so worried about alienating one or another cohort in our coalition that we don't know what to say when normal people look at that and say, wait a second, I send my kids to college so they can learn, not so that they can burn buildings and trash lawns, right? And so on and so forth. When we put pronouns after names and say she, her, as opposed to saying, you know what, if I call you by the wrong pronoun, call me out, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But stop with the virtue signaling and just speak to people like they're normal. There's nothing I'm going to say to Shermichael that I'm not going to say to you, that I'm not going to say to somebody else. I speak the same language to everybody. But that's not what Democrats do. We constantly try to parse out different ways of speaking to different cohorts because our focus groups or our polling shows that so-and-so appeals to such and such. That's not how normal people think. It's not common sense. And we need to start being the party of common sense again. Joe Biden is not responsible for that. Neither is Kamala Harris. It is a problem that Democrats have had for years. I've been banging the drum on this for, I don't know how, probably 10 years, if not longer on this. We need to get back to being the party of common sense, that people look at us and say, we understand you. We appreciate what you say because you speak our language. And until we do that, we should stop blaming other people for our own mistakes.
I muted while the video was playing. You were muted as well.
Nice. And if you'd like to support us,
get us better tech training.
help us be better at this. Just before we do go into this, for the man-hating channel from Hakan, from a gay Turkish German, keep up the good work. Thank you so much. As a channel or just a man-hate? Who knows? We'll do both just to be safe. Thank you so much for that, Hakan. Appreciated. Yeah, I mean, it's this. It feels like the same stuff that we've been hearing in the UK, like, you know, after the racial attacks. Like, well, but they've got valid concerns. Just to say, she talks about Latinx being the politically correct term to be using. I know it's been referred to as like wokeism from like the right in the US, but also that term overall is not preferred by like the Hispanic community, right? There's a Latinx is considered to be like quite a frustrating. I think it's something like 4% of people prefer it who are actually in that community. I actually repeated it because someone had mentioned it in the chat the other day, but overall people don't engage with that term. I guess that's one of those examples of like liberal wokeism that does apply, but also I'm just a little bit confused by it because the whole thing is, well, we're supposed to say this because it's politically correct, but actually it seems to be not politically correct. It seems to be the liberal idea of politically correct, I guess.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, you want to listen to communities. And also making everything gender neutral isn't like, that's not what the approach is. Generally from people on the left, like generally you don't just like make everything gender neutral. The idea is that there are specific times when you should use gender neutral terms, but there are some situations where the gender neutral term just happens to be the masculine or the feminine, and that's fine. It might mean different things for different groups. I can't speak so much on that, but I think there's a small amount of truth in what Julie Roginski is saying here. But a couple of things to bear in mind. First of all, Julie Roginski is a Zionist, like a literal Am Israel Kai Zionist, as in like, which is, for those who don't know, is like a phrase for it's like Deus Ex Volt. It's their little phrase for the I think it roughly translates to the Jewish state will live, or the Jews will live. It's basically like long live the Queen, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But it's often used by Zionists, and she's known for just tweeting that. It's always worth bearing in mind that she is actually a Zionist. Like, she's not coming at this from like a neutral perspective. But we all have our biases, not really criticizing her for that. I think the main problem with her approach is she says that leftists don't know how to speak to voters. I think that's true, and that our messaging needs work. Like,
who's our though?
Work. Leftists, the left in as a bubble, because the problem is that I agree there's no left, like single left bubble. But I think that leftists and liberals in an age of rising fascism, in 1933, 1934, doesn't matter whether you're in the SPD or the KPD, your life's at risk. You've got to start coming together. You've got to start using messaging that will like resonate. and you've got to start you got to start acting. But I feel like the problem is the liberal approach to persuasion is adopting the positions of the right wing. But that's not persuading somebody. I haven't persuaded you
No,
that pineapple on pizza is great.
and
If
you never
I
will.
if I just
You
if
never
I
would.
just say it's not great, then I haven't persuaded you that pineapple on pizza is great.
Yeah.
It's not, by the way, obviously.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Terrifying.
but yeah, adopting the positions of your opponents isn't changing minds. That's just changing your positions. And the right wing just does this better. One of the ways that they do it better is by being approachable. They are they're memeing their way, so they get particularly the way they get young men on side. And I've got like a few videos that I'm currently like putting together on TikTok about this. The way that they get young men on side is by getting them laughing with them, finding a way to connect and relate to them, whether it's like through their favorite piece of media or it's by laughing, feminist owned compilations or something like that. Get them laughing at somebody is a good way to do it. And the result is that you're more open to hearing their perspectives, and because you're constantly having it in your ear, you start to take on their worldview and their perspective. The left needs to be good at this. The left needs to be better at catching people's ear. We're good at the substance. We're not good at the aesthetics, and we are entering an age of aesthetics. I could go on about this for fucking ages, but I'm just gonna. I'll let you.
Well, this is I feel like if anyone was watching on Wednesday with the US election debrief special, I basically went on the same tirade, but I have been thinking about it and I've added to my tirade in terms of the thing that's very frustrating with liberals is that they are actively harm the left. Liberals are not left. Liberals are on the right. I was actually talking to my pal the other day, and she was saying that she asked ChatGPT what neoliberalism was and where it fell on the spectrum. And ChatGPT said, and I know using ChatGPT to get these answers, but I think it's interesting. ChatGPT said that based on what it had found, neoliberalism is a right-wing ideology. However, in recent years, it's been used more and more by left-wing parties. And I think ChatGPT put it really well there, because neoliberalism and these liberals and the Democrats are fundamentally right wing. Keir Starmer is right wing as a person. Like the things that he is pushing for, I think they're not having to appeal to these things. They're unmasking and appealing to those things. It's like, great, well, we can pretend, we don't have to pretend as much anymore that we are here for working people. We can just do it because it actually turns out that it's working over here. Reform are doing it, everyone likes it, so we can just be more like them. Problem is, neoliberalism has to sit with this facade of like pretending to care about identity politics, which is where the Latinx thing is a great example, and saying no, everyone should be able to live their best life, and like again having like a rainbow flag on like your political campaign ad and stuff like that. But you're not. But actually, the things that you want are fundamentally right wing. So by having these sorts of groups up front and center and having things like the Democrats, and it's why I keep being really on it when people, in terms of like we as left versus we as, I've always seen myself as part, like until recently or until like maybe 5-6 years ago, whenever Jeremy Corbyn got fucked over, I've seen myself as Labour and I've always described it as we, and I don't anymore. And I think the reason is like these groups will come in, co-opt important conversations about social issues and about social like justice, put those up front, but continue to do all the capitalism that makes people upset and obviously ruins people's lives, and go, no, but you still should just not be, you should just not be bad though. And then it dilutes the whole leftist cause. It actively hurts it. Like it's coming in and diluting the message and making it look bad as well. And then people go, oh, it's just wokeism because it doesn't have any substance. There is substance. It's just not being put out by a group that is fundamentally right wing. And I think that's where it's like it's annoying because it feels like this whole conversation, in a way, talking about identity politics is not the way to win this election. Correct. However, it's not because identity politics aren't something that's important. It's because it's being said by someone who fundamentally doesn't give a shit if your life gets better or worse, because they are funded by big businesses. So it's this really annoying space where I'm like, kinda.
Well, the right talks about identity politics all the time.
Yeah, it's like their whole
They
thing.
do.
They love
They love talking about identity politics. It's just you don't think of it as identity politics when it's coming from a right wing perspective, because they value aesthetics, the aesthetics of comedy, the aesthetics of power above everything else.
Yeah.
So when that is front and center, you don't notice the snuck premises that are being snuck into your into what you're doing. You know, Trump and like just listing like a couple of them: Trump, Farage, Boris Johnson, and Mussolini are all these kind of macho figures who are larger than life. They are ridiculous, and you laugh at them. You know, they're funny, and they stick in your mind because you hear them out because they're funny.
Yeah.
But in that funny is a sort of social reaction of like, you get the social reaction of like, I'm listening to Farage, Boris Johnson, Trump because they're funny, and then somebody turns around and says to you, oh no, they're dangerous. And to somebody who's listening to them, to somebody who's like bought into that, there's a bit of a power trip in that, like a masculine power trip in it of like, that's just it. You don't think of him necessarily as macho, but the type of masculinity that he represents is one that is macho because it makes particularly women, but also people who are like more intellectual, people who are like less respected by the right, frightened, right? It makes them frightened. And because it makes them frightened, it gives a lot of these people who are like, let's be honest, a lot of them are like edgy young men who want to be like the edgiest person in the room. It gives them like a bit of a power boost. So playing into that only makes it worse. If you want to actually have identity politics for the left, it has to be based on a mockery of these people that says, okay, we're not taking them too seriously. Regardless of whether you actually take them seriously, that's not what's important here, right? Because I think you should take them seriously. I think they are a serious threat. But the way that you get through to these people is by laughing at the Trump, the Farage, and once you've got them laughing, once you've got them on side, you've got them rhetorically listening to you, listening to your humor, that is when you can start to introduce the ideas and start to reject their ideas, because identity politics isn't something that's irrelevant to any of these conversations. There's no situation where there's no identity politics. You know what I mean?
Let's just not have them. Like, my pronouns aren't.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point of in terms of talking about like needing to appeal to people's perspectives. It feels like a plan where people will go like, oh well, now we have to appeal to the far right because there's more people who are far right now, and it's a way to just completely shake responsibility of like all political opinion. The thing about them being like a joke and being able to kind of laugh at it, I think it's also a part that, again, I feel like liberals ruin. I'm going to blame liberals again, shockingly. It's also this area where, the whole issue that you have when you talk about identity politics is like, liberals see it as voluntarism. Like, you should do it because it makes you a good person. And you should do all these, like, and you shouldn't be racist because you should be a good person. And you should use people's pronouns because that makes you a good person. And it doesn't fundamentally recognize that all of capitalism has been built on divide and conquer along like racial lines or along gender lines or along anything that they can find in order to split people apart. Like, if we don't acknowledge that part, then you are just a dickhead saying to someone, well, actually, you should just be saying this, like, for no reason. And because of that kind of earnest, concerned, paternalistic attitude that Keir Starmer's doing all the time, where it's like, well, we have to make serious choices, guys. Like, referring to Israel as she, doing all of that really strange stuff. Like, it comes off as a complete facade, and it ends up completely undermining any actual efforts. I did want to say I saw a video the other day that was talking about the potential issue in like the manosphere on social media. I'm not going to bring in too much I'm not going to man hate again now. My husband's a man.
Oh,
okay.
I'm disappointed.
I don't want to say donations retracted. Oh well, forget it. I did want to say on that someone had mentioned, I can't remember the creator's name, but I'll reshare it on Twitter after this. He was basically saying the issue that we found with the manosphere now is that people haven't, all of the guys who are like self-respecting haven't made podcasts because they know that men with podcasts are so toxic and so unfortunate. But as a result, what that's left is only the toxic men are making podcasts, which means that all of these younger guys who want to who want to consume content, like there's Hassan, and then there's like, you've got like Kevin. We've got a couple of guys out here doing live streams and stuff, but there is this kind of gap in the market now. So I think actually it's good that you guys are on the channel, being not absolutely terrible. That's a compliment from me. I think fill the manosphere.
Yeah, good compliment. Yeah, you're working on it. It's good. It's coming along.
I think you're doing very well.
Yes. Yes. With regards to the like lack of male role models, it's also a bit of a lack of good policy that comes from the left as well, a lack of good approach that comes from the left, because
True, Anton, by the way.
there are a minority of leftists online who are doing something that is so unhelpful. They get a systemic analysis and they try to present the systemic analysis, and the systemic analysis itself is good. But the problem is they try to make individual people accountable for what whole groups of people are doing and apply it in a way which, like, rhetorically is really unhelpful. Like, there's truth to like the example I'm going to use is the all men until no men, which is a statement that I have defended online again and again and again. Fundamentally, that's a good one. That is because the what it's doing is the it we're talking about there is the collaboration and perpetuation of systemic violence, right? It's the little ways in which men uphold violence and normalize the disregard of women's autonomy in their daily lives that leads to rape culture and patriarchal violence. But it's little ways that we uphold that. It's not saying that every man is a rapist. That's not what it's saying. However, that messaging, I feel like leftists get confused in it, and they start going that sometimes they'll go online and they will represent that in a way that is like, you as an individual man are responsible for the whole of society's masculinity. It loses the systemic perspective entirely, and instead makes individuals responsible for whole systems, when, like, feminist theorists like bell hooks are very clear that it's not individual men that are the problem. It is the system. And that's not to say that individual men can't be bad. They are bad, and that individual men can't, like, deliberately uphold patriarchy in a way which is extremely bad, like voting for Trump, for example. It's saying that if you approach it systemically, you're gonna be able to win over a lot more people than if you tell people that they as individuals are not just upholding a bad system, but they are personally responsible for it and personally responsible for the dismantling of it.
And that's what liberals do, because they make everything individualistic, and that's why you have this stuff. And I've already complained about Stand Up to Racism, but the whole protesting of stop Trump, no to Trump, just Trump. If we say no to Trump, will it all be fixed? Oh, we get Trump's gone because we've said no to him by going out in the street with a placard and not actually engaging in any kind of community or speaking to anyone on the ground or making any kind of tangible human difference. We're literally going to wave a placard at people saying no to Trump. And won't that fix it? It's that individualism that fails to recognize these things. But it is also so funny because there's so much fragility to that, of like, if I hear a black content creator talking about not trusting white people, I don't go into the space and go, what about me though? Don't you trust me specifically? Am I not a good person? And it happens so much with this kind of the male fragility side of it. It goes back to Brett Kavanaugh crying over liking a beer.
Could I ask you to pull up a comment? I don't know how to do it on this one. It's Holly's comment. I don't know if you can see it in the... Yeah. So one big the comment reads one big problem with gendering the problem is it removes women's autonomy and glosses over some women can be horrible too. Bell Hooks is really clear about this. We're talking about systems of violence, right? We're not when we're gendering the problem, we have to like notice that there is a biologically essentialist heuristics to our society. That is, we take on frameworks which regard women in a certain way and men a certain way in a very essentialist fashion. But this is the observation of that isn't like gendering the problem. That's observing the problem. And I agree with you, the problem shouldn't be gendered. But as Bell Hooks said, you should acknowledge that women do absorb and project patriarchy down to their children. They project it onto other men. They project it to other women. Like that is something. Yeah, absolutely, women take part in patriarchy, and women recycle these ideas as well. Men have a lot more power to do so because we've got a lot more voice typically under patriarchy. But that's not like Kemi Badenoch in her time in the leadership is going to do far more to uphold patriarchy in a lot of ways than me or Curtis or Lewis or Callum are.
I don't know. Curtis is doing it quite a lot.
Yeah. All right. Me, Callum, and Lewis will exclude Curtis for the purposes of this.
I want to bring just into this. Martin has said no discussion of class SMH. Well, Martin, how about now? Because we are going to talk about it, because that's literally what we were saying about 8 minutes ago, in that all of this inequality of every kind through all of these different examples, all the way back to like colonial settler Virginia trying to pit like white working men against black slaves that people have brought in order to try and avoid uprisings and insurrections, through to unions in like early New York. There are loads and loads of examples of how these things being pushed against each other, creating these hierarchical structures, white supremacy, misogyny, all of these different things, benefits capitalism. Homelessness serves capitalism. So it all comes into this kind of class side of things as well. One thing I'm very wary of, though, is that a lot of the comments that I've seen from people have been like, uneducated, poor, working class people voting for Trump. And it's a paternalistic thing that like the likes of The Guardian do. And it's also something that just like, I guess, angry internet people like to do. Because like classism is just something we do, but it's completely misleading as well. Because looking at like the Brexit vote, looking at the reform vote at the last election, looking at Trump votes, it's not class in terms of that perspective becomes really reductive, because people just like to position everyone as being a white working class man, and that's why they vote for certain things. Like, you have to be racist if you're working class, and I don't think that's the case. So it depends on which context you want to talk about.
True. The uneducated thing is like there's some truth to that, but saying that somebody is uneducated isn't an insult. It's that they've been denied certain privileges that have been afforded to some other people. The interesting thing, though, is that people in the very bottom percentile voted overwhelmingly for, or not overwhelmingly, but in the majority for Harris, right? In the bottom tax bracket in the US. And then there's a big boost when you talk about the middle income. And then when you get to the higher, there's a big boost for Trump when you get to the middle income. And then in the higher incomes, it's Harris again. So the picture is actually one where the middle America, the middle class, which comprises a lot of America, were the ones that voted for Trump. It isn't actually the poorest that have done this. Perhaps because a lot of poor people in the US particularly happen to be members of other minority communities, particularly the black community in the US. But also because they're just more acutely aware of these things, because politics has like a very real and obvious effect on their lives. Yeah. But I think the idea of it being middle class is important, because again, I know I bring up Hitler and fascism and Nazi Germany every 10 seconds.
Ding, 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 he's brought it up again.
But the middle class, like the middle class is like literally was the base of Nazi support. Like that was where their base came from, was middle class voters. It wasn't the working class, and it wasn't primarily the richest. They had the support of the richest, but the richest were more likely to be Kaiserreich supporters. They were more likely to be like traditional conservatives than they were to be supporters of the Third Reich in its in its initial stages. Of course, they went along with it. Of course, the working class ended up going along with it. Those who wanted to survive. But yeah, it was the middle class that gave a lot of the Nazis their support in elections and made up a huge amount of their base of support.
Yeah. No, and I think there's another thing on the uneducated side of things, and then I want to go to one comment because I want to say something about the comment. It's Martin again. I'm coming to you, Martin. The not in a threatening way, after all the man-hating comments we've made, but the I think the other thing is in terms of being uneducated, it also depends what education you're talking about. Like if you've gone to I saw like there was a really really good quote that I heard recently that was like, people aren't racist because they're uneducated. There's a lot of people that actually, it's not ignorance, it's not like a lack of knowledge, but a lot of people are very well educated in white supremacy. And you could have gone to all the best schools, you could have gone to all of the best, could have gone to incredible private schools, you could have gone to a very, very fancy university, and you may not have learned anything about critical thinking or intersectionality. Like all of our education system is full of bias. We didn't learn anything about I don't know if you did. We didn't learn anything about the war for independence when I was in school. We learned about how Quarry Bank Mill got formed or limestone.
Sorry, which war for independence?
The US, the
US War of Independence. Oh, yeah.
Didn't learn anything about the Tea Party or anything like that. Literally just learned about Quarry Bank Mill.
So I did learn about the US War of Independence by accident. I was given an assignment on the Civil War. Yeah, I was given an assignment on the Civil War when I was in high school. It was I was only a couple of years into high school. I was 15. No, 15. I can't have been 15. I was 13 or 14. And I was given an assignment to write a report on the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the wrong war, and I ended up handing in a whole essay that was completely wrong.
Devastated.
Yeah, but actually, my teacher accepted it. She was like, "Okay, you've worked hard on this. I can see you put in the effort.
I see the vision."
Yeah, see the vision. But I was like, I didn't really get why what slavery really particularly had to do with the motivation for this war. Because as far as I could see, both sides were not
pretty.
Although interestingly, this is the thing. Interestingly, if you read A Black Woman's History of the United States by Dana Ramey Berry,
that's a reference.
The interesting thing is the British and the Americans, both sides, at various times promised to free black slaves who fought for them, and then constantly broke their promises.
American, they are us at heart, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah.
We'll let that through line carry on.
Yeah.
That's a very good recommendation, actually. The comment I wanted to address was also Martin, just before we go through a few more, was the point about class is that what binds us is class as a class, and we need to be united in struggle and not let other issues divide us. So I agree that there is one fight to be having specifically, and it's the haves and have-nots. It's the 1% and the 99%, because I am a little bit reductive in that sense. However, I think when I'm always very wary of when people say this in response to talking about other intersecting issues, because we have a tendency to say we shouldn't let other issues divide us. Therefore, if trans people ask for us to protect them or speak up for them, we can't do that right now because we're focused on class solidarity. Or whenever we talk about when you talk about class issues, it can be very tempting for people to just go straight into white working class men reductionist and not actually looking at the way that class affects disability rights, the way that class affects immigration, the way that class affects race, all of these different issues coming together. So I agree that this is part of the challenge that I have at the moment, is that when you have all of these kind of right wingers talking about immigration, refugees, asylum seekers, spreading kind of misinformation, my point is always, this is all a distraction we should be focusing on the actual enemy that we're dealing with, which is capitalism trying to destroy us. I'm losing my voice because I've been ranting about capitalism too much this week. But on the other side of that, you have a lot of people on who call themselves leftists, especially white leftists, the likes of Midwestern Marx and stuff like that, who will say anytime you try and bring up any other issue or remotely criticize someone on the left because they haven't considered a certain issue that genuinely affects other people within that so-called class solidarity, people will go, oh, stop bringing other things up. Like, you shouldn't even talk about it. So that's why I always feel a bit wary of going to the point of like, don't let that divide you. Because it shouldn't divide you, but people can say, don't divide us whenever someone levels any level of fair criticism or makes any kind of request to be treated differently. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said, but also there's another angle on it. That's looking at like the potential effects of what is going on here. I would also look at it from a cause perspective and go, you cannot understand fascism and the rise of fascism without understanding how gender relates to this, right? The Third Reich was very clear that women have an equally, I think the way that Hitler phrased it was like, women have an equally important role in the future of the nation. But that role is one of the domestic sphere, where the man's role is the public sphere, right? It's the kind of like, he had clear roles for men and women, and masculinity, muscular masculinity, as the historian Richard Evans put it, was a big part of the Third Reich's vision for themselves. If you look at their art, they were obsessed with artists like Arnold Breker, who painted these big masculine muscle figures, like bicep curling, like fighting in with swords and spears, and not painted, sorry, sculpted, these big masculine muscle figures. And he was a Third Reich's official sculptor. If you look at Germania, Germany's plan for the future, it was basically just no new ideas, just to take the ideas of other countries like the Arc de Triomphe in France and create something that was just bigger, right? Hitler's megalomania, in the most literal sense, was the plan for his world capital, his Germania.
Yeah.
And that's just like, the thing is this is so linked to the core of their ideology because of it being aesthetics and vibes, masculine aesthetics and vibes, that drive everything. It means that you are like, the analogy I like to use is like a soldier on the battlefield. The prime of masculinity is a soldier on the battlefield. A soldier on the battlefield is always in motion. That's why they're drawn to people like Trump, who say it how it is, because it doesn't matter what they're saying, it matters how they're saying it.
Yeah.
It matters that they are constantly in motion, because if you are constantly in motion, then you are perceived as masculine, whereas it is emasculating to be viewed as intellectual, to be viewed as somebody who sits and thinks. Somebody who sits and thinks and gives substantive explanations for these things isn't appealing to these people. The like class element is really important to understand. I agree, but if you want to combat it, it is actually very homoerotic. It is look at Arno Breker's stuff. But if you want to understand fascism, you can't understand it without looking at gender and sexual insecurity. It's a key part of understanding it. It really is. Don't shy away from these things. I'm ranting and Sneaker is starting to look bored. Sorry.
I'm not looking bored. I'm sorry. I was reading the comments because I think it's a really interesting angle through it. I think honestly, as soon as anyone says that something's homoerotic, I'll learn. I'll look into it now.
Yes.
Sold.
Yeah,
fine.
Yes.
I'll learn about politics after all this time.
Yes.
Fine, I'll do it. I do have a degree in politics, guys. I'm sorry. But also, it's not that useful. Weed jock poop pong McPlop. How dare you?
That's a reference to something. What is it?
This discussion is all over.
It's Blackadder. It's a reference to Blackadder. It's I think it's in the 4th series of.
You're gonna come in here
Blackadder.
with a Blackadder reference.
Yeah, it's a Blackadder reference.
How dare you? Get your references up. No, I think, yes, Martin did say, like, do you discuss this on Discord? Because he was talking about it. I think, actually, this is what I think we were actually saying all the way back when we were first talking about liberalism, and the US side of, like, how people communicate on the left. this is interesting because Martin was saying he didn't mean it in the context of setting aside all of those other issues, but in the context of working together to address them. And I think this is part of the challenge, is that you do have everything exists in context of like how it will be perceived by other people. And I think there's a popularization of that rhetoric that is used in order to kind of shut down other voices, and that means that people are a little bit more sensitive to it. We do not have a Discord. We've had a couple of people asking about having a Discord. Cog is the worst person to ask about having a Discord, I think, from what I remember.
I don't know how Discord works. Please
He
don't ask
absolutely
me about
bloody hates a
Discord.
Discord.
I
But
don't know how it works.
it is it's definitely something that we want to look into in terms of finding a way to kind of keep people in the chat. Both myself and Cog are on TikTok. Is TikTok's your main thing as well, right? You make most of your stuff on TikTok.
Yeah, I built. Although I stopped like making videos for them generally because I was putting out content like regularly for like
There's our
2
names.
years. Yeah, my at on TikTok is not Antifa Cog, just to be confusing, but there's a reason behind that, because I made for about 2 years I made content, and I built up to I think it was on about 75,000 followers, and I was thinking going to get 100,000, and then I made some videos on Andrew Tate, and TikTok thought that I was putting out pro Andrew Tate content because their stupid algorithm can't tell the difference. That account got permanently banned, and I've just about built up to, I think I'm on 9.8k followers again. But it was just like, I don't want to put in another 2 years of like posting stuff to TikTok in order to have them just ban my content again. So I hate you, TikTok. I can say that here.
Well, not me. I'm flopping on TikTok at the minute. TikTok, I didn't mean it. Don't listen. I don't. I love you. I've been absolutely mangled by TikTok at the moment. Algorithm, my ratio on my algorithm at the minute is 4-1, like likes to views. No, views to likes. That would be insane the other way around. I'm afraid I don't TikTok. I barely even tick these days.
It's a great comment.
Let alone talk. No, but Martin, you can get involved in the discussion, and we do. So we have these shows. So these shows are a lot more relaxed, as you might be able to tell from the absolute shambles of how I've produced it in this time period. Curtis did show me how to do all of this the other day, and he was like, "Oh, it's really impressive that you've taught yourself how to use this." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty slick. Don't worry about me." And then I accidentally interrupted the countdown at the beginning and went, whoop. But we do, so the Sunday debriefs are every Sunday, obviously, and we do them like 7:30 or 8, and we do them for a couple of hours. They're a lot more informal, a lot more chat based, as you can see. And then we come back on Monday nights, Wednesday nights, Friday nights. We do shows. They're normally from either 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Yeah, thanks, Scotch Soul. Thank you. That's absolutely correct. I made a video about ADHD Awareness Month on TikTok yesterday. It was October. ADHD Awareness Month was. I don't know why I'm flopping. I don't understand why I'm flopping. But the algorithm, I mean, that's also one of the things that's really scary about this the new media stuff. Actually, a lot of people are moving over to WhatsApp groups or Discord now because I was speaking to someone the other day who said they think there's like 2 years left of being able to use social media as like independent media. You know how YouTube used to be like a day at the zoo, people uploading just like home videos, and now it's all like Jimmy Kimmel, like horrible late night skits and stuff, because it will always tip the algorithm towards the things that are more likely to make it money. And TikTok, I think, is going to be exactly the same.
I'm sorry, there's just a national interest. I think that there's an international interest in having some social media platforms that are run by governments and are actually like have like some democratic control over them. But just like, it's not just from a like independent media leftist perspective as well. It's also from like a governments being able to put out messages and them not being like, Keir Starmer not being impersonated by the person who posts feet pics on Twitter, and told that World War III is going to start because they can buy a blue tick now. Like, just like you don't.
I've been caught by that, to be fair, a couple times. I've been caught not by feet pics, That they'll never
Yeah.
get me. But I've been caught by like, oh, is this person really saying this? Oh my god, that's crazy. And then I've sent it to like my sister, and she's been like, clearly not.
Yeah.
Like, zoom in, read the rest of the name or something.
Yes. Yeah.
But can you imagine what a gov.uk social media platform would be?
It does. It would require a lot of.
It'd be like a text post game, like a text game.
Yeah.
Of the 90s.
But to be honest, that's how Twitter started. Like Twitter started as that. With the character limits and everything. There was for a while the threads. It's starting to emerge as an alternative
threads again
for Twitter, but it hasn't taken off.
Yeah. Vicky's made a good comment. It'd be to BBC.
Yeah.
We did have that. But it's like the need for independent media, but a lot of people are now moving over as well to Discord and WhatsApp stuff, because then they don't have to use things like Twitter or like rely on an algorithm to bring you around to certain content. And this gent was actually saying like the next stage will likely be private groups, which will make things more polarized again. But it'll also get us out of it. So,
but misinformation spreads so quickly around aunties' WhatsApp groups, right? Like WhatsApp groups full of aunties from Mumsnet. Like the fastest way you can spread misinformation. If you want to spread a rumor, and I've been thinking about this in terms of like the Trump regime, right? The number one thing that you can do if you hear about anybody in the Trump administration disagreeing with him is boost it, because he is paranoid as shit about people in the polycratic structure of the regime he's going to have to build, undermining his power. Like he's going to be as paranoid as possible about that.
Yeah.
And one of the things you can do is just boost that information, even if it's not true. Like just boost it. It's like JD Vance, like comparing him to saying something like he's America's Hitler a few years ago. Like if you can find articles on that, throw it out there. But the fastest way you can do that is to hand it to a WhatsApp group full of aunties from Mumsnet.
Mumsnet will get that stuff out there.
Shoot round WhatsApp. It will it'll come back round to you in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and about 4 days later, it'll appear on Facebook.
Yeah,
someone will be like, "Can you believe this?" We've got an interesting comment here from, should you like 10, 15 more minutes, 20 minutes? I don't think Brandon's going to be able to join us because I have not heard back from him. Gary said, why are political channels always echo chambers? And then Martin has said, why are politics channels always echo chambers?
That's funny. That's clever.
I quite like that. I'd like to know, Gary, in terms of what you mean specifically being echo chambers. I mean, to be honest, I was talking about this today. My content is an echo chamber. My audience is an echo chamber. I've built an echo chamber on purpose because everything outside the echo chamber is traumatizing for everybody who follows me. And that's also something that we're like talking about as a team in terms of like our content, because there's different roles that different things play in pipelines, right? Like some people are there to like convince people and bring them over. Some people are there to bring people a little bit further down the pipeline. Some people are at the very bottom being like, okay, you're here, now learn and do all of this deep work stuff. And I actually think, I've left the echo chamber a couple times to see what's going on. My feeling is that my role is to support and reinforce the people who are already in my echo chamber with me, as opposed to trying to convince. I used to do a lot of stuff like where I argue with people about like anti-refugee rhetoric and things, and I still engage in it every now and again. But like it's very hard to be in that space also if you're talking to far right people and you're a woman. They don't listen as much. But there are things that I can talk to white people about that they might not listen to other people if they were saying it. So there's like, I don't know if that's relevant in terms of the echo chamber conversation, but like also because we do largely agree on things, I don't know if we should have a big argument.
Something that Sneakrit does really well, and people who watch watch your content will know this, is using humor in your video. Producing for Turn Left. That is something you do very. Sorry, TikTok though is using humor in your videos, right? And that is something that's going to persuade more people than what I do. what I do a lot of the time on TikTok these days is just going on and talking directly to right wingers and debating with them. And although a lot of leftists contact me and go, "Hey, you really, you really helped to inform my perspective. You really it's really good to see you going against these people. I've had like messages since the election about like I need you on this live on this panel. Giving me hope here. Although that's great, that's all valuable contribution. It's not going to be winning over a lot of people. However, what you do is good because it's the humor side of things in content that isn't debates. You're not addressing the right wing, right? You might be laughing at them. You might be, finding humor in some of their takes, mocking them. But that's a lot more powerful because somebody who's a normie, somebody who's a centrist, joins that and goes, "Oh, let's have a laugh. Let's have a laugh." They're not thinking about, "Oh, I want to really inform and change my perspective so that I can improve myself as a human or sharpen my debating skills," which is something that's very much on the left side of the pipeline. You are actually managing to get people, or I suspect you're managing to get people. I haven't got confirmation, but I suspect that that tactic will get more people involved and bring people further down the pipeline to help people avoid far right radicalization particularly through obviously misinformation, given what you do.
Yeah, I mean, thank you saying I'm funny. My video's doing awfully at the moment though, so again, guys, I'm not going to do the support me specifically though. Keep supporting Turn Left, but the everybody go over. But I do think there's two areas, right? Because if I get too angry when I go into debates. For one, Cal tried to get me in that one the other day, and I went in for like 2 seconds, and like almost immediately. So Political does quite a lot of debate hosting as well, and his first note is like, "Be respectful," and I almost immediately violated that in the chat and was like, "No, never mind, I've got to go. This isn't for me." But there's a lot of people who will be in those chats who will not be convinced by anything that I talk about or the way that I talk about it, but will be convinced by the way that you talk about it. And I think that's an important thing in terms of being a pipeline and seeing yourselves as more of a community and a collective action, as opposed to being an independent social creator that's trying to do absolutely everything. And also we're as a group, we're an online area of a pipeline as well. We're not actually, we want to be able to connect more and more to like signposting people towards like actions and community groups and actual actions that people can take on the ground. But we exist in this like little online space of a pipeline as well. Cal, I know I get a free pass in your debate, but I just can't do it. I think TikTok will actually ban me. I don't think it's even a you thing. I was really angry when I went in there. Someone's just said in here that an echo chamber can be a mislabeling of a supportive community of like-minded people who are happy to debate. And also a like-mind, like the whole world is a right-wing echo chamber. It's like when people talk about straight pride, like that's every day. Like, where's the right-wing echo chamber? It's everywhere. Everything else outside of everything that you see on the street, everything that you see in the news media, everything that you see like everywhere is a right-wing echo chamber. It's just our chamber is smaller.
Yeah, I'm practically gonna like reveal the whole set of videos that I'm doing now. But I've been looking at the 4 fundamentals of marketing. You're talking about frequency, reach, targeting, and impact is the other one that you're looking for. They're 4 fundamentals that you need for marketing. And of course, to get frequency and reach. Frequency is it's true of canvassing as well. The more time somebody is canvassed by Labour, the more likely they are to go out and vote for Labour. It's the weirdest thing. Obviously, there's a cut-off point to that, but if you, it's something ridiculous. Like if you knock on somebody's door 3 times and you're canvassing for the Labour Party, they are like twice as likely to go and vote Labour than if you knock on their door once.
Yeah,
frequency matters in marketing. So when you take that into account, it's not surprising actually that echo chambers build up, because what we're doing is we're trying to market ideas to people in a capitalist hellhole. We've got to be like hammering these ideas, getting together and like reinforcing these ideas constantly, and the right wing is doing the same thing. They just have a lot more money to do it. Yeah, I know.
Just keep
Yeah.
constantly pushing it. That's me pushing content.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was doing this. I thought you were like doing the same thing.
Oh no, I wasn't mocking you.
Oh,
No, I
right,
was doing.
okay.
That was me pushing out content all the time.
Oh, that was pushing out content.
Obviously.
Okay. Right.
Sorry, was that didn't mean to distract? But this is something that I say a lot to people when they talk about the importance of, like, people will be like, oh well, you're going to win people over with that attitude. Like if I do a pissy video, because if anyone follows me, my standard is explain a video that's actually quite moderate and useful in terms of media literacy, then I'll get an idiot reply from someone. I'll make an angry video in my kitchen where I normally don't have any makeup on. I'm just like screeching. And then the next video will be an unpacking of that previous video that's a lot more understanding and a lot more patient. And I feel like doing that, like, but people will say when I do the ranty video, they'll be like, oh, you expect to get people on side with that attitude? Now you've made fun of me. I'm going to be a racist and it's your fault. You're the reason
I love
reform's
that.
going to get in because
Yeah.
you've been mean to me a bit on the
Yes.
internet. And it's like, I actually don't care because, one, I don't care, but two, I don't care because exposure therapy, like, human beings, like especially neurotypical human beings, are guided by what they see the majority doing. So if you're even if you don't like me, if all you're seeing is videos of people like me, you'll start to go, oh, well, maybe I just, like, this is how I fit in. This is what the majority of people are saying. So I'm just going to slide into this opinion. And it makes it more socially acceptable. Even if you think I'm doing it in a toxic way. I mean, fucking hell, Piers Morgan's not exactly Nigel Farage, king of diplomacy.
Do you know who Sargon of Akkad is?
I do.
Yeah, he told me on Twitter once. For ages, it was just I just had the quote in my Twitter bio because he told me that I'm the reason Trump won, and it's like
you.
coming from it was me. Apparently, that was me. That was 2016. In 2016, this was in reference to 2016.
Okay,
I was
and
the
then
reason
you've done
Trump
it again
won.
now.
Yeah, I know. Like I must have fucked up. Honestly, you shouldn't let me. I talk in my sleep sometimes, walk in my sleep sometimes, like do insurrections in my sleep. It's like it happens. Like
agree to disagree.
Yeah, I just agree to
We've
disagree.
got different opinions.
Yeah.
Carl of Swindon. Gary said Sargon's great. Gary. Gary, come watch us more. Yes. So I think, to be honest, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to go through for now. I don't think Brandon's going to be able to make it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But if does anyone have anything that they want us to very briefly speak on that's not absolutely bizarre, depending on what you come in with? Because I mean, I will say, gang, some of the comments in here, I don't really know where we're going. Although maybe I haven't helped that. Blaming the chat for being unstructured. Guys, come on. Humor is good. We need more of this.
Yeah. You know, a few years ago, I had a thing of like, leftists need to. We've got art and music on our side, as a whole. Like we're pretty good with art, music, comedy, that sort of thing. We need to be taking more advantage of this stuff. We do media analysis pretty well. Like leftists do media analysis pretty well, and that stuff's taken off. But the idea that we're just vibing, the idea that leftists should just be having a good time, should just be, dancing along to the music, and people will come and dance with us because we're having fun, and we look like we're having fun because we're having a laugh, we're joking, we're exactly, we'll just dance along. But like those ideas actually create a more welcoming community, and leftists being a bit more relaxed and chilled, particularly, and it's going to be really hard in this era. I'm not gonna lie, it's going to be hard
because we're kept in firefighting mode, right? We're constantly being told like the most outrageous stuff because we don't get, like, I think there's actually a really good talking about this with someone the other day, like actually having conversations in real life with leftists, like in the Turn Left chat, our chat, We have a great laugh. We have fun all the time.
Yeah.
But there's so many horrors all of the time, and there's so many people that constantly be putting in like extreme danger, and every situation is absolutely awful and intense. Night, Jacqueline. And I think it's like we have to be able to prioritize the things that we need to actually address as like urgent issues essentially, and do everything that we can. But there is also a need to create space for yourself to have like lefty joy, and actually have a good time. But I think a lot of that also comes from like offline interactions as well.
Yes. Touch
But
grass.
hopefully, hey, just to have a fun little lefty thing, watch the chat watch everyone join now. We're just having a laugh. Pineapple on pizza. Yes or nay? I like the framing of that, Dominique. Yes or nay?
This is.
I mean,
no, this is how the Great Purge began. This is how Stalin's Great Purge began. Was like tricking people with questions like this.
We've tried to have a little bit of light-hearted fun.
Yeah, I have to bring up Stalin.
Straight back to Stalin, man. I mean, pineapple on pizza is disgusting.
We went like a full 5-10 minutes without mentioning 1930s politics. I had to bring it back to 1930s politics.
Somebody did say earlier that we should have a cog Nazi bell for when you bring it up. But
yes.
We shouldn't call it that. We shouldn't have that, and we shouldn't
like
call it that. But a poorly named bell.
Yes. Yeah.
Bell. Well, let's reword it. We've got an image issue. Pineapple on pizza is elite.
I mean, that's the worst take that Gary's like put some real stonkers in the chat. But that's the worst one.
Gary's had some clangers in the chat, but that's the lowest tier. That feels, Gary, that convinces me that you're just trying to be reactionary with us.
Yeah,
by saying these things.
This is just rage bait at this point.
Yeah, he's just trying to distract us from the cause. Future is right. Don't know what that means. Luden Ludwig. Trump's a laugh a minute. Helps me through my rage against genocide. Fair. Andy, I agree with Gary on pizza matters. Okay, well, we've lost another one.
Oh no. This is how people fall down the alt-right pipeline.
This is what we've done. We've accidentally created it. Keir Starmer to increase defence spending when Trump takes office. What's he going to do? Give the locals water pistols. Oh my God. I don't know. Honestly, there have been so many myriad stories about Keir Starmer being an absolute embarrassing little weasel. And this is also the problem with liberals, is because they'll do virtue signalling when it suits them, and then they'll also fall back in line with capitalism as soon as they get a chance. We've had the fun break now. We're back to this. Because now all of the right are looking at, the more right are looking at the Labour government and the Labour cabinet and going, but didn't you say that Trump was a bad guy? And now look, now you're having to suck up to him. And there's no excuse for it, because they've never had any balls. They've never cared. Like, they've wanted to say that they don't like him because they thought that was the cool thing to do at the time, and they thought it'd benefit them. And now they think it benefits them to do it the other way around. And it does just make you look insanely weak and like you don't have any principles, almost like you don't have any principles.
I am concerned, I'm not going to lie, about cuts to public services in order to pay for defense spending in the wake of Trump withdrawing support from NATO. Like, that is something that concerns me. But yeah, it will be facilitated by people like Keir Starmer, who, as you say, don't have any principles.
Yeah, it's infuriating. I think one last... I think by the way, the defense spending, I think, will be covered more so in week as well next week. I think maybe, is it worth just quickly clarifying for Keith?
Yeah, that's the same Sargon of Akkad. His immortal spirit, over 4,000 years, came to me in a vision on Twitter and told me that I was the reason that Trump was going to win the election. It was a really weird interaction. It was not. I was really deceived by the 2009 film, 2002 film, The Mummy, on what the rise of undead rulers from the ancient era was going to be like. Apparently, they just moan about right wing politics and how lonely they feel and how it's the left's fault that nobody likes them.
Is that what Sargon said? It's the
Pretty
left's
much,
fault.
yeah. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but yeah.
Lives in Swinton now.
Yes.
I think, to be honest, that's the Sargon that you should be focusing on anyway. I wouldn't worry about the other one.
Yeah, probably not worth your time. I'll be honest.
Takes. Is there anything final you'd like to add? Anything that you'd like to bring in?
No, I don't think so.
Good.
Yeah. Don't eat pineapple on pizza, obviously.
Don't eat pineapple on pizza. And also don't be fascists. I'll mention it as Cog forgot.
The pineapple on pizza is the more important of those two.
Your silence is deafening on this one. Notably, didn't bring up fascism as a problem. Yeah. Certainly things I'm not right with. Gary, you should come back on with us on Monday. Who is hosting tomorrow evening? Who do we have on tomorrow evening?
That's a good question. I can't remember.
Let me double check. I'm going to jump in. Googling in real time is another strong... The clicking.
Yeah, we're very organised.
We know who's on next.
November. Callum apparently is hosting tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic.
And not Curtis. I don't know who the guest is, I'll be honest.
No, so we will. So next week, yes, tomorrow night we have Cal on, and then on Wednesday we have Lewis hosting, coming back, likely going to be late. And then we have Curtis again on Friday, and then we'll be back on Sunday for the debrief. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7:30 p.m. onwards, and then on Sunday we'll be doing 7:30 till 9:30. Cal has dropped in the chat. Me, Cal's hosting. It has been wonderful to see you all this evening. Again, if anyone does want to support us and help us get better at production, or even help us just have a production person so that I'm not overconfidently doing this again, you can support us over at turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. I hope everybody has a lovely evening. Unless you're Luden Ludwig, who's dissed us in the chat. I hope you have a terrible evening. And everybody else, have a lovely evening. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you very much, all.